If you're familiar with the ideas of Richard Dawkins, who talked about genes being selfish and propagating themselves for their own benefit, you will sort of be aware of the concept of memes. Memes are ideas that propagate themselves, they are in competition with other ideas, and they sometimes crop up over and over again throughout history, where people discover them through coincidence, or they've got some inkling, of a some force inside them that wants to know about the world, and so they pick up these ideas. I mean, a good example would be, as I spoke about in my last video, about the Epicureans, about the guy who was a construction worker in the Renaissance era, who became interested in old manuscripts and found the Epicurean works by Lucretius on the nature of things and matter, which of course led in part to a social and technological revolution um, in Europe, which is detailed in a book called The Swerve, or another old series from the 1990s, The Day the World Took Off. Also mentioned that as well. And of course, the Stoics as well, because of the popularity of that. And those ideas ultimately inspired Thomas Jefferson and Tom Paine to write the American Constitution. So that's a sort of positive thing about memes from the concept of Western rationalism. And what would I say is Western rationalism? Well, the meme of Western rationalism keeps recreating itself. It has many different branches. Okay, some parts of Western culture have stressed the sort of heroic aspects of Western culture at the expense of other parts of Western culture. You might say the Spartans, for instance, were only interested in the heroic elements in terms of militarism, and other people have taken up that meme of Western society. You could even lay that assertion at the early English and early Nordic Celtic people east of the Rhine and in Scandinavia. In some of the literature, that's more expressed than sort of the egalitarian elements of that culture. Um, but some memes, I would assert, are selfish because people, of course, either had imperfect knowledge when they created them, or they are a reaction against another meme, but they have a, a, a common thread between those two reactionary elements. Um, you can, as I'll explain, feudalistic capitalism and Marxism, they are both capitalistic because they're both concerned with capital. Because capital at that time was the most important thing in sort of the 19th century, but it links in with all the other memes that are competing with them. So in a sense, Richard Dawkins was talking about memes as though they had a life of their own, and people, if they take on a meme as their personal tribal identity, which is what I don't want people to do in this video. I don't want people to be tribal. When I'm talking about terms later on, it will be basically what I'm trying to get to the core essence of a term, rather than how a term is being corrupted. I won't be able to cover all the terms in the English language, of course, but we'll try and focus on some other ones. This, of course, is going to be quite a big series, so I'll try to keep each segment down to 10 minutes, and please follow on. And basically, I would say that Western rationalism is based on the idea that reason is the only thing that we've so far developed that can critique reason itself, and to sort of improve on reason. The Epicureans and Stoics, in the sense that the Epicureans believed that life was about pleasure and the avoidance of pain. I don't mean like base pleasures, just eating yourself to yourself silly till you're sick or other things, I'm talking about, just a little bit of swordfish, that was the example that was often give. Just cook right and, a little learning, not too much to trouble the mind, and other things like that. Whereas the Stoics were more into virtue. And I'll be framing my analysis of Marxism and feudal capitalism from those perspectives of reason. I do have some biases towards my own views will be expressed in the discussion, which was started because I saw a video about a philosopher who's expressing Marxist views and gave a critique of it, and the person whose video it was accused me of being immoral because I didn't like Marxism and because I was a social democrat and believed in the social market and the Co-operative movement, which was of course was started by the Rochdale pioneers. And if you've read a book called The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist, which of course has a lot of critics as well, you will note the patriotic elements of early English socialism, social democracy, and the Western rationalist ideas there, which of course had their root in Epicurean and Stoic philosophy, because of course the Stoics emphasised la dulcha vita, which was the good life, which of course famous Romans subscribed to. But dulcha vita in that time meant not just living a comfortable life, which was often not comfortable, but to live a good life, which meant a virtuous life. So that I'm trying to get this part of the video down to why I'm trying to be clear in my terms and references. Okay, so we shall begin, because I've had to write this down. I normally just talk to the camera just like I'm doing now, but we can start now. The idealistic theoretical apologists for Marx hold no water. Everywhere it has been practiced or attempted to be put into practice, it is called genocide, slavery and feudalism. It undermines the racial ethnic unity of cultures, that is within cultures, and the ethics of those cultures, whether it be Eurasian or in Russia and China or Africa, or as it has attempted and failed to do in Europe. Marxism and Freud's propagandism, and I'm talking in reference to both Freud himself and his nephew, who wrote a book called Public Relations, which influenced how Goebbels and Stalin used propaganda. As I said, Marx and Freud's propagandism is just an extension of a Middle Eastern cult of irrational absolutism that has hated Western rationalism and hope from the outset. The first thing Marxists did in Russia was kill the Social Democrats and the Social Democratic Transitional Government, as well as turn on the idea of the Soviets, which were workers' councils, as a purely democratic process of decision making. So they got rid of the Soviets eventually, although the word Soviet has become in congress with the Soviet Union, which was like basically a genocidal project of Lenin and Stalin and the others. But it was not intended that way. It was Soviets were supposed to be workers' councils where they came together in a congress, and each council gave its pure conception of democracy. So it did have a kind of Western basis in that sense,